Are you ready to face something that has no name but leaves scars? It's time to discover what lies beyond the light. Only if you are ready to face the deepest horror should you step inside. We're opening doors to a world where every rustle hides a dreadful secret, and every step might be your last. What evil lurks behind these walls? What dark forces awaken in the night's silence? What happens when your deepest fears begin to haunt your consciousness? Leave all hope and comfort behind. Turn on the light if you dare, and be ready to discover what hides in the darkest corners of your fear.
In the dimly lit office of Spectral Seekers, a team of seasoned paranormal investigators gathered around a cluttered table strewn with equipment and case files. The walls were adorned with photographs of past investigations, featuring shadowy figures and eerie locations that had left indelible marks on their memories. The team was a blend of unique personalities, each bringing their own expertise to the group. At the head of the table sat Dr. Emily Carter, a clinical psychologist with a penchant for the supernatural. Her analytical mind often kept the team grounded, allowing them to approach the paranormal with a critical eye. Emily had a keen understanding of human behavior, which helped her navigate the psychological aspects of their investigations. She was known for her calm demeanor, even in the most unsettling situations, but behind her composed exterior, there lay an insatiable curiosity about the unknown. Next to her was Marcus Reed, a former police detective whose experience in criminal investigations made him a valuable asset. Marcus was pragmatic and often skeptical, preferring logical explanations over the supernatural. Yet, despite his skepticism, he had witnessed enough inexplicable phenomena to keep his mind open. With a rugged appearance and an easy smile, Marcus provided a balance to Emily's seriousness, often lightening the atmosphere with his dry humor. Then there was Samantha Sam Torres, the tech wizard of the team. She had an affinity for electronics and gadgets, always experimenting with the latest tools for ghost hunting. Her vibrant personality and enthusiasm for the paranormal were infectious. Sam had a knack for capturing evidence that others often missed, but her playful nature sometimes led to unexpected mishaps, like the time she accidentally activated a spirit box in the middle of a quiet cemetery, startling everyone nearby. As the trio prepared for their next assignment, an unsettling energy enveloped the office. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Emily glanced at the old grandfather clock ticking ominously in the corner, its sound echoing through the silence like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the office phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the tension. Marcus answered, his brow furrowing as he listened. After a moment, he passed the phone to Emily, who spoke with an air of intrigue. The call was from an anonymous source, detailing a chilling story about Room 13 in an abandoned psychiatric hospital. According to the caller, the room was a site of horrific rituals, and a demonic entity had claimed it as a portal, preying on anyone who dared to enter. As Emily relayed the details to Marcus and Sam, the unease in the room thickened. Sam's computer screen flickered, momentarily distorting the images of their previous investigations. She frowned, tapping the mouse, but the images returned to normal. "That's odd," she muttered, brushing it off, though a shiver ran down her spine. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, deep in thought. "We've dealt with plenty of haunted places before, but this sounds different. We need to be cautious." His voice, usually steady, carried a hint of uncertainty. Emily nodded, her own apprehension rising as she considered the implications of what lay ahead. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the very walls were listening, waiting for their next move. The team had faced the paranormal before, but this time, there was an unsettling feeling that they were being watched not just by the living, but by something far more sinister, lurking just beyond their perception. As they gathered their equipment, the unease settled into their bones, a silent acknowledgement of the dangers that awaited them in Room 13. With each step toward the unknown, they understood that the investigation would test not only their skills, but also their resolve in the face of true terror. The journey to the abandoned psychiatric hospital was fraught with tension as the team drove along the winding, desolate roads that seemed to stretch endlessly into the encroaching darkness. The air outside was thick with mist, curling around the tires of their vehicle like ghostly fingers reaching out to deter them from their destination. As they approached the looming structure, a sense of dread settled over the team, a palpable weight that pressed down on their chests. The hospital, once a place of healing, now stood in a state of grotesque decay. Its crumbling fade was cloaked in shadows, the moonlight barely penetrating the thick clouds that hung overhead. Broken windows gaped like empty eye sockets, and the rusted iron gate creaked ominously as they pushed it open, the sound echoing through the stillness like a foreboding warning. Vines twisted around the brickwork, reclaiming the building, while the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. As they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Dust motes danced in the faint light of their flashlights, creating an almost ethereal glow. Each footfall stirred up a cloud of stale air that carried with it the whispers of the past, a whisper of lost hopes and tormented souls. The peeling wallpaper, adorned with faded floral patterns, clung desperately to the walls, bearing witness to the horrors that had unfolded within. Rumors of Room 13 had preceded them, tales of unholy rituals and dark entities that had taken root within its confines. Some locals spoke of patients disappearing without a trace, their spirits now trapped in the very walls that had once imprisoned them. The team exchanged uneasy glances, the stories weighing heavily on their minds as they made their way through the desolate halls, each corridor more foreboding than the last. Strange occurrences began to unfold around them. A cold breeze swept through the corridor, causing Sam to shiver involuntarily, though the air was still and stagnant. Emily halted abruptly, her heart racing as she caught a fleeting shadow darting past the edge of her vision. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Marcus nodded, his brow furrowing as he strained to listen to the silence that enveloped them. Suddenly, a distant sound echoed through the halls, a low, mournful wail that seemed to emanate from deep within the building. It sent chills racing down their spines, and for a moment, they stood frozen in place, fear gripping their hearts. Was it merely the wind, or something far more sinister? They ventured deeper into the hospital, drawn by an unseen force, their instincts urging them onward. The oppressive atmosphere thickened, and the weight of unseen eyes followed their every move. As they approached a door marked with peeling paint and rusted hinges, the feeling of dread intensified. This was it, the door to Room 13. The heavy door creaked ominously as the team pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay, and as they descended, an inexplicable chill enveloped them, creeping beneath their skin and raising goosebumps along their arms. Each step seemed to echo in the stillness, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. The remnants of the hospital's past whispered through the walls, and an unsettling feeling of being watched began to gnaw at their nerves. As they reached the lower floor, the light from their flashlights flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced like specters across the walls. Old patient records lay scattered across the floor, yellowed pages revealing the horrors that had once transpired within these walls. Emily picked up a few, her hands trembling as she read about unethical practices, experimental treatments that had left patients broken and tormented. These people, they were treated like animals, she said, her voice strained with disbelief. Each record felt like a ghostly echo of despair, amplifying their growing sense of dread. Suddenly, Sam let out a gasp, pointing toward a darkened corner where the temperature had dropped dramatically. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her breath visible in the icy air. Marcus nodded, his skepticism fading as he too felt a penetrating cold that seemed to sap the warmth from their bodies. The air felt charged, as if something unseen was stirring, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As they moved cautiously through the dimly lit space, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the corridor, causing them to jump. "What was that?" Marcus whispered, his voice tight with urgency. The sound had been unnaturally loud, reverberating through the stillness of the hospital. They exchanged glances, fear and curiosity battling within them. Compelled by adrenaline, they crept toward the source of the noise, their flashlights piercing the darkness. As they rounded a corner, they were met with an unnerving sight. A rusted gurney lay toppled over, its wheels still spinning slightly as if it had been hastily abandoned. Emily felt a surge of panic grip her heart. "We should go back," she urged, her instincts screaming at her to retreat. But before they could react, a shadow flickered at the edge of their vision, darting into a nearby room. It was almost imperceptible, yet it stirred an instinctual fear within them. Without thinking, they rushed to the door, peering inside. The room was empty, save for a single flickering light bulb that swung precariously from the ceiling, illuminating the faded remnants of patient belongings, torn clothes, shattered porcelain cups, and crumbling photographs. Then, without warning, the temperature plummeted again, and a low growl reverberated through the air. It was primal, filled with malice, and it sent chills racing down their spines. The growl seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, wrapping around them like a vice. Panic surged through Emily as she turned to flee, her heart pounding in her chest. "We need to leave now," she shouted, urgency fueling her words. In a frenzy, they retreated from the room, the oppressive atmosphere bearing down on them like a heavy shroud. The shadows felt alive, closing in as they hurried back up the staircase. As they reached the ground floor, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang, causing them to jump. They stood in stunned silence, fear coursing through their veins, each of them grappling with the realization that they were not alone in this haunted place. Breathless and shaken, they huddled together in a small alcove, their eyes wide with terror. They could feel the weight of the hospital's dark history pressing down on them, an unshakable reminder of the horrors that lurked within. The encounter had left them rattled, and for the first time, doubt began to creep into their minds. What had they stumbled into, and were they prepared for what awaited them in room 13? The oppressive silence of the hospital seemed to thicken as the team advanced towards room 13. Each step along the dimly lit corridor felt like a descent into madness, the air heavy with an unexplainable dread. With every heartbeat, the sensation of being watched intensified, as if unseen eyes lurked behind the peeling wallpaper, eagerly anticipating their arrival. The flickering lights above cast erratic shadows, distorting their surroundings and heightening the atmosphere of impending doom. As they moved closer, the remnants of the hospital's sinister past began to manifest around them. The walls whispered secrets of the tormented souls that had once inhabited this place. Samantha's electronic equipment began to malfunction, the screens glitching and emitting static that pierced the eerie quiet. "This is not normal," she muttered, her voice quaking. Marcus, usually the skeptic, felt a chill run down his spine, the air growing heavier with each step forward. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the adjacent room, sending them into a state of alarm. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her heart racing. The sound was like the slamming of a door, yet there was no one around. Compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity, they edged closer, peering into the room where the noise had originated. The sight that met their eyes was both mesmerizing and horrifying. Furniture overturned, and the remnants of shattered glass littered the floor, catching the flickering light like shards of ice. As they regrouped, the lights overhead flickered more violently, casting an unsettling dance of shadows. A sudden drop in temperature enveloped them, and Emily could see her breath clouding in front of her. "Something isn't right," she breathed, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. Just then, a cold wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing their flashlights momentarily. In that suffocating darkness, they heard a low growl that reverberated through the walls, a sound primal and filled with malice. "Let's get out of here," Marcus urged, his pragmatic nature wavering. Yet, an unexplainable force seemed to pull them forward, compelling them towards room 13, where the very air felt charged with malevolence. As they approached the door, strange symbols etched into the wood caught Emily's eye runes that pulsed with a dark energy. She felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding, realizing that these were the markings of the rituals that had been performed here, each representing a sacrifice made to the demonic entity that haunted this place. Their minds began to unravel under the weight of the room's history. The stories of patients subjected to horrific experiments echoed in their thoughts. The rituals, designed to unleash dark forces, had not only trapped souls, but had also birthed a terror that lingered, waiting for the next unsuspecting visitors to claim. With each passing moment, the psychological toll mounted, and the team felt the creeping fingers of despair clawing at their minds. As their hands trembled, they finally reached the door to room 13. It stood slightly ajar, a sinister invitation to step into the unknown. The air was thick with an acrid smell that clawed at their throats, and the whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a tempest. They exchanged fearful glances, the weight of their decision pressing heavily upon them. Emily's heart raced, and she could feel the pulse of something dark within the room, as if it were alive and waiting for them. With a shared nod, they opened the door, stepping into room 13. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, the air felt electric, charged with a presence that was both terrifying and intoxicating. Shadows danced along the walls, and a cacophony of whispers filled their ears, each voice pleading, warning, or perhaps cursing them for intruding. The room seemed to pulse with energy, as if it were breathing, and the very walls appeared to close in around them. In that moment, as they stood at the threshold of horror, the reality of what they were about to face crystallized in their minds. They were not just investigators, they were intruders in a realm where the past met the present, where the horrors of the asylum had awakened something far more sinister than they could ever have imagined. As the team stepped into room 13, a palpable sense of dread washed over them. The air was thick and stagnant, suffused with an overwhelming stench of decay that clawed at their throats. Emily's heart raced as her flashlight illuminated the room, revealing walls lined with grotesque markings, symbols of ancient rituals that seemed to writhe and pulsate in the flickering light. A deep, resonant growl emanated from the shadows, sending shivers down their spines. They were no longer merely investigators, they were prey. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, towering and grotesque. The demon was a grotesque amalgamation of twisted limbs and jagged features, its skin a sickly gray that glistened as if wet. Empty eye sockets glowed with an otherworldly fire, and a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth twisted into a hungry grin. The air crackled with malevolent energy as it advanced towards them, the floor trembling with each step it took. "Stand your ground," Marcus shouted, though his voice trembled with fear. He raised his flashlight, casting a beam of light toward the demon, but it merely hissed, the light flickering as if it were being swallowed by the darkness surrounding the creature. Emily, with her heart pounding, quickly activated the spirit box, hoping for some guidance, but the device emitted only static, interrupted by chilling whispers that seemed to echo their fears. As the demon lunged forward, Sam's instincts kicked in. With a flick of her wrist, she activated a strobe light, illuminating the room in bursts of blinding white. The demon recoiled, screeching in fury, the sound reverberating through the hospital like a banshee's wail. "Now!" Emily commanded, and they charged forward with adrenaline coursing through their veins. The battle began in earnest. Marcus wielded a wooden stake, reminiscent of ancient tales of banishing evil, while Emily brandished a salt-filled spray bottle, an old remedy against malevolent spirits. The demon lashed out, swiping at them with claws that glinted like knives in the strobe light. Sam darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the lethal swipe, but the force of the demon's rage sent her crashing into a dilapidated desk, pain lancing through her side. "Sam!" Emily cried, but the distraction allowed the demon to turn its attention to her. It lunged, its gaping maw snapping inches from her face. In a desperate instinct, she sprayed the salt, hitting the beast squarely in the eyes. The demon shrieked, the sound vibrating through the room with a terrifying intensity, and for a moment, it staggered back, claws flailing wildly in a panic. But the creature was relentless. It surged forward again, this time targeting Marcus. The detective had just enough time to sidestep, but the demon's claws caught him along his arm, ripping through flesh and sending him tumbling to the ground. Pain shot through him as he clutched his injury, feeling the warmth of blood seep through his fingers. The demon's eyes glimmered with feral delight, sensing the scent of fear and blood. "Get up," Sam yelled, scrambling to her feet despite the pain radiating from her side. She hurled a handful of salt at the demon, which made it recoil once more, but the creature wasn't finished. It turned towards her, its eyes narrowing, and she felt a wave of darkness wash over her, a chilling sensation that threatened to envelop her mind. "No! Fight it!" Emily screamed, recognizing the signs of possession. She rushed to Sam's side, grabbing her hand and pouring her energy into the connection. "Stay with us! You're stronger than this!" The demon screeched, struggling against the protective barrier they were trying to create, but it was a battle of wills. With a final push, Emily raised the spirit box high, shouting over the chaos. "We are not afraid of you!" Her voice echoed in the room, and for a fleeting moment, the demon faltered, uncertainty flickering in its fiery gaze. "You have no power here!" Fueled by their united resolve, Marcus struggled to his feet, despite the pain coursing through his arm. He lunged at the demon, the wooden stake poised to strike. With a primal roar, he plunged the weapon directly into the demon's heart. The creature convulsed, shrieking in agony as dark smoke began to pour from its body, swirling around the room like a tempest. The temperature plummeted as the demon's form flickered, its power waning. With an anguished howl, it shattered into 1,000 shards of darkness, dissipating into the very air they breathed. Silence fell, but the remnants of its malevolence lingered, the walls still echoing with the cries of the tormented souls trapped within. Breathless and battered, the team collapsed onto the cold floor, adrenaline and fear coursing through their veins. They had survived, but the scars of the encounter would remain with them forever. The battle was won, but the darkness that had seeped into their lives would take time to heal. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the atmosphere in room 13 shifted dramatically. The oppressive weight that had once threatened to crush them began to lift, replaced by an eerie stillness that hung in the air. As the remnants of the demon dissipated, the team staggered back, still reeling from the intensity of their encounter. They were alive, but the victory felt hollow, as though the shadows of the hospital had claimed a piece of their souls. "Is it really over?" Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse as he probed the silence. Emily, still shaken, scanned the room for any signs of lingering darkness. "It should be," she replied, though doubt laced her words. They exchanged weary glances, the adrenaline that had fueled them now giving way to exhaustion. Sam, nursing a bruised side, struggled to her feet, the adrenaline fading as the pain began to set in. "Let's get out of here," she urged, her voice trembling. They knew they had to leave before the darkness reclaimed its hold. As they stumbled back through the corridor, the walls seemed to close in around them, a physical manifestation of the terror they had just faced. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, whispering remnants of the malevolence they had encountered. But as they reached the exit, a sudden chill shot through the air, and a sense of dread washed over them once more. Marcus paused, a sinking feeling in his gut. "Wait. Something's not right," he murmured, glancing back toward the dimly lit hallway. A low growl echoed, sending shivers down their spines. They turned, eyes wide with horror, as a familiar darkness began to coalesce in the shadows. "No, it can't be?" Sam gasped, realizing too late that the demon's essence had not been vanquished, but had found a new host. The energy surged, and they saw a flicker of movement at the edge of their group. Emily's heart dropped as she turned to Marcus, who now stared blankly ahead, eyes glazed over with an otherworldly fire. "Marcus!" Emily screamed, reaching for him, but it was too late. The demon had latched onto his spirit, using him as a vessel to escape the confines of room 13. He turned slowly, a twisted smile spreading across his face as he spoke in a voice that was not his own. "You thought you could defeat me? Panic surged through the team as they realized their nightmare was far from over. They had defeated the demon in room 13, but it had merely changed its approach. "We have to fight it!" Sam shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. Emily nodded, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way to save Marcus from the dark entity that now possessed him. "Together!" Emily rallied, grasping Sam's hand tightly. They focused their energy, pouring everything they had into Marcus, attempting to reach the man they had known and loved. "You're stronger than this, Marcus. Fight it!" But the demon's hold was powerful, and the shadows around them began to swirl, threatening to consume them all. As the light flickered, Emily felt a surge of hopelessness wash over her. The battle was not just against a demon, it was against despair itself. In that moment of chaos, Emily's thoughts turned to the rituals they had uncovered, the ancient symbols that had marked room 13. "The runes!" she shouted. "They must have a way to break the bond." With renewed determination, they began to chant the phrases they had learned, their voices rising above the chaos. Gradually, a light began to emanate from their hands, illuminating Marcus's face, which contorted in agony. The demon within him howled, the sound reverberating off the walls, but they pressed on. "You will not take him!" Emily cried, her heart pounding as they intensified their efforts. With one final surge of strength, the light engulfed Marcus, and for a fleeting moment, his true self broke through the darkness. "Help! Me!" he gasped, his voice barely audible. The room erupted in blinding light as the bond between the demon and Marcus shattered, the energy exploding outward and forcing the entity back into the shadows. The team collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, praying that they had succeeded, but as they looked at Marcus, their hearts sank. His eyes were filled with terror and confusion, the remnants of the demon's influence still clouding his mind. "What happened?" he whispered, looking around as if waking from a nightmare. Emily and Sam rushed to his side, relief flooding through them as they embraced him tightly. Yet, even as they rejoiced in their temporary victory, a lingering doubt gnawed at Emily's heart. The scars of their encounter would never fully heal, and as they stepped out of the hospital into the cool night air, an unsettling feeling remained. They had escaped room 13, but the darkness had not been vanquished. It had merely changed its form, lurking now within their own ranks, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Weeks had passed since the harrowing events in room 13, yet the shadows of the abandoned psychiatric hospital continued to haunt the surviving members of Spectral Seekers. Emily, Marcus, and Sam had returned to their lives, but the specter of their traumatic experience lingered like a dark cloud, casting a pall over their once vibrant spirits. Each member coped in their own way. Marcus threw himself into his work, hoping that the grind of daily life would drown out the memories, while Sam, usually the upbeat tech genius, found herself flinching at the slightest noise, her laughter replaced by a brittle silence that echoed her unease. Emily, the psychologist, felt the weight of her profession pressing down on her. She had always been the rock of the team, the one who analyzed and provided support, but now she found herself unable to escape the memories that flickered behind her eyelids at night. The growls, the smell of decay, each recollection sent a shiver of fear coursing through her. She often found herself staring at the walls of her office, convinced that the darkness they had encountered had seeped into her very being. The once comforting space now felt like a trap, the air thick with an energy that made her skin crawl. One evening, as they gathered for a rare team meeting, the atmosphere was tense. "I just can't shake it," Sam admitted, her voice trembling. "I keep seeing shadows, and I feel like something is watching me." Marcus nodded somberly, echoing her fears. "I thought I could forget, but every time I close my eyes, I'm back there, in that room." Emily's heart sank. She had hoped they could move forward. "We faced something powerful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we survived. We can't let it control us." Yet deep down, she feared that the darkness had not been vanquished. It had merely retreated, biding its time. Days turned into weeks, and the team's connection began to fray. Emily's phone buzzed one late afternoon with an anonymous message, a warning that sent chills down her spine. It's coming for you. The demon in room 13 is not done. She stared at the screen, a cold dread enveloping her. Had they truly escaped, or had they merely opened a door to something far worse? As the sun set on the horizon, casting long shadows across their lives, a sense of unresolved dread settled over them. The lingering horror of room 13 was far from over. It had spread its influence beyond the hospital, weaving itself into the fabric of their existence. The team may have left the darkness behind, but they knew that the battle was far from won.